Our next speaker is Mr. Ziad Asali, President and founder of the American Task Force on Palestine, a non-profit, non-partisan organization based in Washington, D.C. Mr. Asali has written for numerous print and television media outlets and is a regular speaker at international conferences, Arab American conventions, and academic events. It is a pleasure and an honor to have you with us, sir. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, sir. It is a pleasure to be with you, and I'd once again thank you for your major contribution to the Palestinian cause and for your courage.
Thanks.
Let me just say a couple of words about who we are. We have an organization called the American Task Force in Palestine that is now 1 decade old. And we essentially came to the conclusion that it is about time that we speak on our own behalf. It's about time for us to figure out our own problems and then figure out our own view to solutions. Unfiltered, uninterpreted, and unflattered. We started working in Washington, D.C., where policy is formed, the capital, Rome of our times. That's where we live and that's where we work. The exact polar opposite from Berlin, where the fights are in nice hotel rooms and in arenas of the power in the Congress and the White House, and where ideas count, where the toughness and the roughness that you see in struggle is the same, but it takes different forms. Now, it is essential. I'm speaking now as a physician, which is what I really am and have done that for the bulk of my life. It's essential that you have the diagnosis right. If you don't, everything else is going to go wrong for you and for your patients. We really needed to know what's going on. We needed to know, and it's very hard to know, where part of the whole deal is to confuse the weak party. This is a zero-sum game, has been a zero-sum game for a long time. And if it goes on as a zero-sum game, it will go on with the same consequences, which is what you have so eloquently described today, Ambassador Mansour. We need to disrupt this uneven balance of power at every level that we need, at every level that we need. In matters of policy, there are rules to the game. You have to play according to the rules. Again, the exact opposite of the rules of engagement in Palestine. You need to defend your position and to be able to have the people who watch judge rather than the interpreters decide what the argument is about. Since we are newcomers to the game, it has not been easy, I can tell you. And we had to play it correctly, and it has been going on. We're satisfied with what we have done. We would like to do a lot more. Let me start with the obvious. There is a consensus about the two-state solution, about the policy. Everybody in the world agrees about the policy by now. When we started, it wasn't like that. But the quartet, which is the US, Europe, Russia, and the United Nations, is the whole world. That is the policy. How come this policy does not translate into implementation? This is a burning question for us. What is it? What's wrong? Everybody says, oh, Israel wants the two-state solution, and the Palestinians and the Arabs. What is going on? There are answers to this, and we should seek the answers, and we should remedy the answers. And by the way, we can remedy the answers in so many ways, not in just one way, in so many ways. Now, the Israelis and the Palestinians agree on the conflict, but their politics do not support a resolution on the basis of two-state solution. That is a fact. Neither the politics of Palestine, as we see it, leads clearly to a two-state solution, because what we're seeing is continued weakening of the Palestinians at all kinds of levels. And we can discuss that later if there are any questions and answers. The Israelis have a very nice formula going on. They're negotiating with the Palestinians as they are taking more of the land. And when the Palestinians complain, we say, well, you refuse to negotiate. It is very convenient. Now, I have learned, and we have learned, that it is a sin, a political sin, close to malpractice, to generalize about the Palestinians and to generalize about the Israelis. The Israelis are many, multitude. There are differences in their approach and their understanding and their way out of this crisis, as there are amongst the Palestinians. We have to figure out who's who, and we have to connect the people who want a solution and disconnect ourselves and weaken those who do not. That is part of the struggle. What are the obstacles to the peace that you talk about? Fundamental to the obstacles is this business of disconnect between the dishonesty between the policy of two states and the politics of the two states. It's within and without. There is a lot of mistrust between the two parties that is well justified. The gap, however, is not just between the leadership, the Palestinian Israeli leadership, it is within each camp. And also, the opposition is within each camp. But the issues that separate the people are substantive and real. There are actual issues. There are people in Israel who want the land and don't want the Palestinian people in it. And there are people in Palestine who talk about accepting a two-state solution while they're really still thinking of Ramli and Haifa, etc., etc. You cannot have it both ways on both sides. You have to be honest in the discourse with each other in order to build a system. There is no military solution. That is not a now you tell me. There is no military solution. Okay. So the solution has to be something else. Partly negotiations, and none of us is blind to the fact that we've had 20 years of negotiations with no progress. In fact, with deep progress, weakening of the positions of the Palestinians with each cycle of negotiations. But there are other things to do. And part of it I want to reflect again on what Imad said. You absolutely have to improve things on the ground for the Palestinians. You must find ways, and that does not mean what they do themselves on the ground. That is important. Steadfastness is essential. But we cannot ask these people to go on sacrificing and getting killed while nobody else is doing some heavy lifting for them, to actually be able to stay and to actually help them, to help their hospitals, to help their schools, to help their governance, all of that. That has to be part of the responsibility of the international community to move things forward. This discrepancy of power between the Palestinians and the Israelis cannot be bridged by anyone if it continues. You have to improve the level of the institutions of the Palestinians, the quality of their education, the quality of their lives, their competitive ability, even to negotiate. If you are serious about asking these people to, okay, let's solve it by peace or by negotiations. This is a very important dynamic, I think, and I think it's important that we understand it is part of our responsibility. The other thing is that, adding a layer of complications, is that Palestine used to be the #1 issue for the Arabs and the Israelis and the Middle East for a long time, the top priority. At least everybody said so. Okay. The things that have been happening recently in the region have made people get preoccupied. The Egyptians are preoccupied, the Iraqis are preoccupied, the Lebanese, the Syrians, everybody. And Emotionally, I think everybody's still engaged within Palestine, but in practical terms, they are less engaged. And so is the world. And so is the world. This argument is advanced by people who do not mean well. The fact, oh, don't forget about Palestine, nobody cares about it. You know, there is nothing that will solve all the complicated issues of the Middle East if the Palestinian issue is not dealt with. It has to be dealt with. You cannot forget about Palestine. You can postpone the interest of today in moving on, but it has to be a strategic goal because it is a crucible of all the conflicts in the world. Religions, race, brown, black, white, haves, have-nots, developed, quote-unquote, and not so developed. So many things that touch the core of human beings in the region are impacted by Palestine. It needs to be resolved. In fact, it is probably the embodiment of the committee's purpose, your committee's purpose, the inalienable rights of the Palestinians cannot be realized without a state of Palestine. It's the ultimate realization of the justice to Palestine, if you will, and peace. Now, what's happening in the region is very interesting. It has created new dynamics. So they're preoccupied with their own affairs, but they also have different relations within the Middle East. You know, there is a new threat that is coming from Iran, for instance, and its proxies. The Israelis and the Arabs of the Levant seem to be closer on that issue to each other than sometimes even in the United States. So the only thing that stands between them and getting some kind of a coordinated policy, of course, is the issue of Palestine. Yet another incentive to solve the issue of Palestine. Well, what are the opportunities right now for advancing peace? Let me start out with the name of Kerry. I mean, this guy has been, really motivated, and he has been at it, and he's been making calls. Do you know he makes calls every day about Palestine? He really does. And in the middle of all these messy issues in the world, for whatever purposes, successfully or not so successfully. And again, I refer to the recent, negotiations. No one, the ultimate request of everybody, let's not declare failure. It's not been a success, but let's just hope it doesn't fail. So it is very, very iffy. But nevertheless, we've always wanted to have the United States engaged. Well, we have had an engaged United States. We all thought that only if the United States gets engaged and says, well, we've had it. We've had it almost for a year. It did not prove to be enough. But nevertheless, that's a positive thing, and I think it's important to keep the process going. You see, what replaces the two-state solution is nothing that could end this conflict. The only conflict-ending solution is the two-state solution. It gives everybody his own little house, her own little house, where you can stay. Doesn't give you everything. Doesn't give you your neighbor's house, but gives you something. All other solutions are non-solutions. They keep the conflict going under other terms, with other descriptions. And that is why it has to be kept going, even though the negotiations seem to be unhelpful these days. We need to keep that in mind. Something positive has happened recently in the world, which is European involvement. I think it is a little bit of a reaction to the lack of progress under American guidance. Eventually they took a real step, a legal and practical step, which is to impose restrictions on the products of the settlements. That is important. It's the first time, and it has teeth. And it is causing problems for the Israelis who are still wanting to continue with the absence of pursuit of the two-state solution. Now, this is giving tough love to Israel. Everybody likes to say we love Israel dearly, and we want to say, we say, we don't want to offend the Israelis. We say, here I'm a Palestinian American. I say, we are not against Israel, we are against the occupation. This simply means We are for two-state solution, and we mean it. We mean it. And to get that, we need the support of so many people in Israel who agree with us. Anti-Semitism does not help us, does not help anybody, and it's been used. Now there is an opportunity for real action to demand from the leadership of the Palestinians and the Israelis to be more accountable. You get money from us, you get support from us, and this applies to everybody. Well, and you want us. So let's demand things of you. Israel cannot have people sitting in the cabinet completely opposed to a two-state solution, completely opposed to the policy of the country, and saying the most egregious things, not just about the Palestinians, against the United States, which is its ultimate sponsor. Somebody has to hold them to account. The Palestinians have people who are going around loose, doing things, and certainly using violence to the detriment of all the work that people like Ahmad do. The real courage is not to shoot. Anyway, so this has to be fixed. The involvement of the world in demanding more of the Palestinians. That brings us to what is it that can be done on the land? We need to support their ability to stay. We need to have better governments for them, and we need to insist on that. We need to have better institutions, and we need to provide the wherewithal for that and insist on providing it. And we need to de-incentivize Israel. Just simply de-incentivize Israel. It's not, okay, so you have your own state, but you cannot have other people's own. And there are penalties. That is why the European movement is significant. Settlement expansion, I haven't mentioned anything. Let me just say, nothing is more detrimental to peace than settlement expansion and home demolition, period. And we know that the United States has tried and failed, but that doesn't mean that this cannot be, a need that needs to be fulfilled in Israel. Everybody has to use whatever there is within Israel, the ability to fight settlement expansion. This is doable, and we're watching part of what we do, by the way, is we watch the Israeli political system very closely, and we need to, and not as adversaries or enemies or anything, just as, these people are important for us to deal with if we want to solve this problem, and there are some serious changes within the body politic in Israel that are worthy of nurturing. The United States is very aware of this. I'm taking too long, I'm sorry. I just want to end up by saying the present negotiations are difficult and may not yield much, but every effort has to be done to preserve the process while we improve the institution and state building program on the ground. Thank you very much.
I thank Mr. Asali for his comprehensive and insightful presentation, which has described in a fairly accurately where things stand and lays out a number of important issues which will need to be addressed going forward. I would like to express the committee's sincere appreciation for your participation in this meeting.
Thank you, sir. I'm honored.